Welcome to the Insight Cafe. My name is Nikon. I'm your host. And today, I have a very special friend with me. Her name is Lily Sais. So before I let her on to talk to you, I'm going to intro her. So joining me today is Lily. She's a former lead school psychologist from Los Angeles who spent 12 years supporting mental health in schools. After struggling with anxiety, panic, and OCD herself, Lily found the three principles understanding in 2018, which transformed her life. And since 2020, she's been coaching others to uncover the peace beneath their own anxious thoughts. Welcome, Lily, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm super excited to have you here because to me, you're one of the few people who are so good at talking about anxiety and helping people understand how it works and how to see through it. And I've been watching your work. I'm a big fan of your work. And more so, I'm so impressed by the things people say about your work because they have these miraculous transformations or deep transformations just by spending time with you and your work. But before we get into that, I want people to understand better, like who you are, how you got here, what's your story.
Yeah. Um, well, I was also, I was a very happy little kid, loved friends and being social. And I also worried a lot, about my parents dying and bad things happening in the world. And, like many kids had a lot of kind of magical thinking of, well, if I prayed and I did this correctly, or if I did this. And so, um, I could have benefited from this understanding early on because I had no idea that if I felt something strongly, it wasn't true. So I'd have all these thoughts and I'd like break my own heart and scare myself. But I thought like the strong feelings were like, yeah, this is true. All these horrible things could happen. Um, but it was kind of fine too. Like it didn't impact my life too much. And as a kid, kind of grew up into a more anxious adult, and but also very like still very functioning, very manageable, very happy, um but also very seeking, and everything really kind of changed in 2011 when I had a panic attack driving on the freeway. And it was so scary. I felt like I was losing my mind. And I'd already been, in and out of therapy for many years and, working on myself. And I was a school psychologist at that time. I've always loved talking and conversation and mental health. Um, but I like ramped everything up because I was like, oh my gosh, and it was so innocent, but I'd already probably, I can't remember what else I was doing, but just like on my path to feeling better and seeking more. And part of it is also like, it's all interesting to me, kind of continuing education, learning different treatment modalities. So became certified to teach meditation and mindfulness in schools and more cognitive behavioral therapy. And I myself would, do hypnosis and neurofeedback and eating even cleaner because I was already very around my panic attack time. I had a very big unhealthy obsession with health. Um, I'm somebody who can have a really fast moving brain and be really action focused, and sometimes it works out well. And sometimes it's like to my detriment if it's in an obsessive way. But so I kept doing more and not feeling better and feeling worse and kept having panic attacks and not being able to drive. And I would just like do more and have even a stricter night routine and a longer morning routine and, more certifications. Okay, what about if I'm also practicing yoga? If I'm like meditating and teaching meditation and yoga all day long, in addition to grounding techniques and like I can't be anxious, but I was. And I'm in LA, so there's like you can get the healthiest food and attend all the meditation classes and the breathwork classes. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what's wrong with me? And I really had a lot of thoughts like I'm broken. But I was so afraid that if I didn't keep working hard, I would lose my mind. And so my fear was that this was more than just anxiety. Um, One of my symptoms of anxiety was this really what felt very weird, a feeling of disconnection, kind of like you're high when you're not, or like it did feel like I was about to go crazy. And I thought like people would say this is a panic attack, but I kind of felt like, well, I'm holding on so tight to stop this panic attack, to stop me from going crazy. And it was all just this misunderstanding about how safe it was. Um, but so I, like many people, really felt like I'm broken, something's wrong with me. This is the fact that it's still here and getting worse is evidence to that. And this strange feeling is also evidence that something is deeply wrong with me and I must work really hard. And, I've talked to so many people now that it's so common. I would hear other people's experience with anxiety and I'd be like, well, good for you, but I'm really crazy. And nobody's as severe as me. And I felt very alone and very damaged. Um, and also very confused at why was everything I was taught in grad school that seemed really great. Like, why wasn't it working for me? And, um, but I kept, I'd try things and some things I'd work and I'd be so hopeful and some things was really fun and, various like week-long retreats but then I kept being backed or being really anxious and having panic attacks when I was driving. And I put into, Google or something one time, like anxiety, panic, help. And up popped Sari Taylor. And she had a simple kind of 5-day video sequence where she sent me a video that was like 30 minutes and she was sharing about the principles. And and one, she seemed to experience anxiety in the severe way that I did. And nobody that I'd ever met seemed to have it to my level. And she was saying something I hadn't heard before. And one of the first insights I had was that I was doing too much, but like I heard it without judgment for the first time. That I really saw clearly like how everything I was doing wasn't working. And also maybe everything I was doing was contributing to how yucky how anxious I was feeling. And I was just genuinely curious. I was like, is this true? Is there like maybe I don't need to have such a rigid night routine and a rigid morning routine. So I was really afraid of not getting enough sleep or like the blue light from the TV, or even the Wi-Fi. And so but I would like try to connect with my husband at the time, but I would like not want to watch TV. And then if I did, I wear blue light blocking glasses, but I'd be like, I got to be in bed by 9, I need like an hour long Kundalini yoga meditation. And so when I was hearing that, I was like, and I'd like wake up in the morning and do a long meditation. And all of these things are also beautiful and fine. But the way that I was practicing was out of fear and thinking, I'm broken and I need to do this so I do not lose my mind and panic and then lose my mind. And so I started to be like, And I just did a little bit less. And that was one big insight. Oh, because I also saw that how my wording was that something got me through that first panic attack. My wisdom got me through because that kind of came together. And I was not prepared for that panic attack, but like, so rather than I used to look at my panic attacks when I was driving with such shame because I would pull over and then I would be unable to drive or what felt like. And so I'd have to call somebody to pick me up and then someone had to bring me back to my car. And sometimes it was my parents. And as a 30-year-old, I was like, but with this new insights, I saw it with kindness that I always pulled over and found a place to park and I always returned to balance. So then I also was curious about this idea that not all my thoughts are true. And even if I felt it strongly, it didn't mean it was true. And that thoughts flowed and there was less for me to do. And I just was genuinely like, this is interesting. Is this true? And I would just kind of in this, and I had later heard that you can't be curious and resistant at the same time. And I think this curiousness about this, without me trying, really dissolved some of this resistance I had to anxiety and panic because I would resist it and then it would like linger. And I just was like, is this really true? And so a lot of my focus was on driving. And so I'd be driving and I'd have, the same kind of hyper vigilant thoughts. I used to always be scanning, like, how do my arms feel? Is that a panic attack coming? And I like still had those same thoughts, but I was like, well, maybe it's not necessary. It was just like this softer thing. And so everything just started to be easier. Like, and it just kind of got on a roll really in a way that worked so beautifully. Like me doing less, I think my nervous system settled for the first time without me working on my nervous system, because before I would do all these nervous system things and Joe Dispenza and I'm going to rewire my brain, and I wasn't doing much. I was like living and living with more freedom. And I really, my anxiety just kept falling away and I kept feeling better and better. And I was like doing so much less. And so I remember thinking, why doesn't everybody know this? Why doesn't this taught in grad school? I want to scream this from the rooftops. And I really did. I've always loved sharing anything that, seems great with my students and my clients. And so I started sharing some of the principles and some of it using the Spark curriculum, because when you're a school psychologist or in education, it's really great to have something evidence-based, and the Spark curriculum is evidence-based. And so kind of started sharing from that. But I really, my heart was like, I want all these anxious adults to know this, because, but I thought it needed to be in person because everything I always did was in person. But I just felt like, how am I going to do this? But I was like, I need all the anxious adults to know, like, you're not broken. It's so simple. Like, I just want to like scream it from the rooftops. Um, and then in 2020, the pandemic was starting, and I'd already been, it's like kind of this, my heart is so very sad for anybody impacted by the pandemic. But it was a great time for me in some ways, in that when I was getting divorced and there was a bit more motivation to like start something to be able to get my own place. And then I had this downtime, and so many other adults were online. And I was like, I'm going to do an online coaching group to just share some of this that I know about anxiety. And that's what I started. And I did a woman's wonderful course called Course from Scratch. It wasn't anything about what you're teaching, but the bones of how to start. And I put, it was like $1,600, and I put it on a PayPal credit card. And I was like, I just need to, if all I can pay this off in 6 months, I'm just going to give it my all. And maybe it will change my life, and maybe I'll just break even. And so I followed every one of her instructions until she came to kind of how to market. And a lot of it was like sliding into people's DMs on Instagram. And I was like, I cannot do that. Like, I'm not gonna be like, hey, I think you're really anxious. Do you want to join my group? And I just had this feeling, if people are going to want to work with me, they're just going to want to work with me. Like, I am not, um, and I really didn't even know. I just was like doing it. And then my daughter was like, what about TikTok? Because Instagram at first wasn't really speaking to me, in that I didn't, it was more at that time just like a photo, and I hated photos of me. And and I started watching TikTok and laughing my head off. And I posted a video, and it didn't do very well. And then I was watching, on TikTok, it was like, this was 4.5 years ago or something, just some trending little sound. And I'm like, had an idea about health anxiety. And it was a 7-second video. I did it. And this was during the pandemic. I'm divorced, living with my parents, but we'd have to move when they'd rent out their house. So we're like going to a hotel before this Airbnb. And I'm looking at my TikTok, and it's, before it would have like 32 views. And this time, I remember when it said 300, I'm like, something's different. And it was like, that video ended up going viral with like hundreds of thousands of views, which was my most viewed video. And everything just changed from there. And I was like, um, and I would just tap into this creativity, and this humor that I think I had no idea that that would be part of, or like the lightness. And I tapped into all the conversations I had as a school psychologist. I will wrap up my story, but like, I remember one being like, oh, I want to talk about intrusive thoughts, and not really even knowing the name, but like that was something that so many people had talked about. And as a psychologist, one of my, I don't know, I guess skills was just being like, kids would come of all ages and they would say stuff, and a lot of it I'd be like, oh yeah, me too, or this, and like how normal. And they've just like this sigh of relief, because it's like, you think, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I'm broken and crazy. And so I did a video on intrusive thoughts. And it went viral, but people were sending me messages like, I wanted to end my life before I saw this video. You saved my life. And I talked about some kind of taboo thoughts too. And I remember before, like, the guidance that I got was like, talk about these four things. And I remember being like, I don't want to talk about the sexual one. But it came up with people of all ages. And I'm like, I'm going to post it. And people like, for better or for worse, however this sounds, the feedback that I got when my videos started going viral and people would send me, like, I was just screenshotting every comment and every message. And I literally thought my purpose is done and I could die. I've never been so fulfilled in my life. And and that just kind of bolstered me and I'd have more ideas. But in the beginning I was more just posting kind of traditional, or like, even though it was well received, like anxiety panic content, and I thought I want to share the principles though. Like, how do I do that in a short way? How do I, rather than just talking about like anxiety, panic, intrusive thought stuff, what about this deeper thing? And so I remember just kind of being like, okay, I'm open to guidance. I'm open to inspiration. And so I guess within like 6 months of the first year, I did start to kind of share a bit about innate health. And I really wanted people to get like about there's less for you to do, things flow, like you have this inner wisdom, but in a digestible way. And so my business just really took off very within the first month, I would say, when I really started. And it just has grown from there. And in the past 4.5 years, and it's been amazing. So that's my story.
I loved all of that. You're a wonderful storyteller. As you were telling a story, I felt like I had like right next to you, just watching it all happen. And something that really struck me in your story is how it's like that saying, it's like we think life is like a straight line, but it's like go here, it's like a squiggly line, and how normal and how natural that is. Like that's so wonderful. I know everybody listening will feel seen and heard in your story. So thank you so much. And
My
there's something that I know that you're really like you can't stop talking about right now. And that thing is how safe and temporary every feeling is. And I'd love for you to speak more to that because for me, I know a lot of feelings don't feel safe and temporary. Sometimes they feel like I'm going to feel like this forever. I'm forever going to be heartbroken, or like I don't feel safe and I have to do something right now. I have to fix it. I have um, OCD, da 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 da. Like, I'd love for you to speak more to that.
Yeah. And maybe it would be helpful. I'll share some client stories or
Yeah,
some
sure.
clients have seen. I remember asking one client, like, I can't remember the exact words, but like, not if this was working or if you were reaching your goals. Like, it's not that, but it had that same, like, what would that look like? And and I remember being interested in what she was saying because she said, okay, so I'd go to dinner and I'd be anxious, um, and I wouldn't mind, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal, and I'd keep on eating and da da da, and then next thing I know, I'd feel better. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's interesting that, and I think I pointed it out, like, oh, so you didn't even say I go to dinner and I'm not anxious at all. She said, oh no, it will be more powerful if like um I go and a little anxiety comes up, but it's not a big deal. And that's actually when my experience and so many of my clients, and what's the most empowering thing is a lot of people that I work with, um, a good proportion of them, one way that they have felt safe is to kind of isolate a bit more and not leave the house as much or not do things. And actually, when they start to see that if they go out more into the world, they're at a restaurant or they're driving or they're flying or whatever, they're at their kids' sporting event and they experience anxiety, that it's fine. And like that's been so freeing, is like, oh, um, I had this wave, and it varies to person, but I can think somebody, there's I work with people of all ages. And the story of this one was like a woman in college and she was out with her friends and just this wave of anxiety came. And sometimes it's normal at first. You're like, no. And then you're like, oh, wait, this is fine. Um, and I'm kind of jumping from story to story, but I remember when a woman said, she's out at a wine and cheese event and a wave of anxiety came. But she just remembered how safe it is, how temporary, and that it flows on its own. And she just got curious. And so she just like got back in the conversation. A lot of the people will say, "Oh, I know if I just like get back in a conversation." Um, and she said, and I remember her saying it was the best thing because there was wine and cheese, which you can focus on. Oh, I'm going to eat a little cheese. I'm going to eat a little wine. And then she said, and then like I took my eyes off of it and the anxiety left, and I hear stories about that all the time when people feel so empowered, like, oh, I was, um, and sometimes it's just they'll notice I had a bunch of anxious thoughts, but I don't even know if I was anxious. And then I just kind of let it be there and I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And next thing I knew, it was kind of gone. Um, and, I want to make sure I'm speaking to how safe and how temporary it is, and see if I can give a better story than that.
What do
I
you
think,
mean? Let me ask. Can I ask you a question?
yes, yeah,
Like,
please.
from your stories, I can kind of get a sense that feelings are temporary in the sense that whatever you're feeling now, if you give it a moment, it'll pass,
Yeah.
right? And even feelings like heartbreak, right? Because I've been heartbroken. I thought I'm gonna feel like this forever, and it was like my forever was 2 years, and then it passed, right? It was a long ass 2 years, but it passed. The thing that got me about this sentence is how safe and temporary every feeling is the word safe. Like help me see that better because I really want to see how feelings can be safe, even the ones that don't feel safe.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's something that has felt much more true for me
Mm,
this past year. And so I don't know. I think when underneath the noise, um, so there's a few things that I think might, and that's what I've seen. I don't want people listening to
yeah,
think, oh my God, so I have
yeah,
to feel like
yeah,
every
yeah.
feeling safe to be free or to feel
Mm.
good. Because were you going to say something there?
No, no, I was just adding
Oh,
on to it, but you continue. I'll go after. Yeah.
I guess there's many ways that people can start to like this illusion of danger. And because a lot of times
Mm,
what happens is people very innocently scare themselves with their imagination.
mm,
And um, like a lot of times people that are in states of kind of chronic anxiety have physical symptoms, and so it can really feel like I am going to faint, I'm going to throw up, I'm going to pass out. What if this is a heart attack? This is the time. My heart's been checked out, but this could be the time. And so they might be, but this could be physically unsafe. Or it's kind of like 50-50, or some people are like, this could be a heart attack, this could be a stroke, or I could really lose my mind. What if I'm going insane? What if I'm turning schizophrenic? And so it's like some people are like, well, anxiety might be safe, but what about this? And um, and there's just infinite insights that people have that might start that to fall away. And one of them is seeing how predictable things are, like the predictable symptoms, the predictable thoughts, just as if somebody has been heartbroken multiple times, when they are heartbroken and they have that same thought of, I'm never going to feel better, there might be that moment of pause and they're like, hey, I think you felt like that 2 years ago. And
yeah.
remember, and so there's this remembering, like I'll never find somebody else if I like that was the one. And then you might have this recognition. And so oftentimes when people start to see, when we know something's predictable, that helps us remember how safe it is and how temporary. Like if you've gotten a bad cold or a bad flu, a lot of the symptoms and thoughts are very predictable. So we can kind of take our eyes off of it.
Yeah.
Even if growing up and we have diarrhea, if that's something we've kind of experienced before, we know others have experienced it. Even if we have all the little thoughts, like we know there's this deep knowing. Um, that it's safe and it's temporary and it will change. Um, and so people can start to get eyes for that around around anxiety and around the symptoms. They take them less personally too. And and also when people are a bit more curious than they are resistant, there is a bit of a softening. And that also allows us to feel the safety and the temporary of any feeling. Um, and one story of a woman who she said her brain is like just a big fear that she had was about being nauseous out going out to eat, and particularly with her now husband. And because she had like, even when they were just boyfriend and girlfriend and then engaged, and it was like she had all this meaning and fear around being nauseous, and then she would lose her appetite. And why was it stronger with her most special person in her life? And she would try to prevent being nauseous and try to like control the menu. And she shared such a great insight on her honeymoon. Um, she they were on their honeymoon, there was like a fixed menu, so she couldn't even like be controlling about what she ate. And she started to see with much more clarity that it wasn't about preventing being nauseous or preventing nausea. It was about an understanding. And she started to see how safe it was, even if she was nauseous, and it was safe if she didn't have an appetite. Because I remember when I had shared with her that that was sometimes my experience, and sometimes if I wouldn't eat. And she was like, "Oh, wait." And she didn't know, like she had made up, you can't be nauseous, you have to eat, and that means you're enjoying your time with your partner, and like, and and I said, "Oh, blah blah blah." And even sharing a story of New Year's Eve with a fixed menu, and I said, "And I just didn't eat and I had a good time." And so she started to see, um like, oh, for her words were like, I don't have to spend my life preventing nausea when I understand it. And so for her, it was really this feeling of how safe it was, whatever experience showed up. And also that it would be fleeting. But even if it wasn't, she was safe. Even if it wasn't, and it was really cool. She said they ended up meeting another couple who was on their honeymoon who got food poisoning and threw up at their wedding. And she had said, "Did you still have a good time though?" And they said, "Yeah, we had a great time." And so she's just really seeing about how one experience that's been like her big lingering thing of all these thoughts and fears around nausea showing up at restaurants and important days is is dissolving. And it wasn't about preventing it, it was just about this understanding. And um and so um that's one way that I think I've seen safety show up.
Yeah. As you were talking, I had an insight about safety. And what I realized was, oh, it's like a fever. A fever is your body keeping you safe because it's eliminating the virus. So every feeling is simply your body telling you what you're thinking about. And anxiety, things like anxiety is like, oh, you're thinking a lot. Like your body needs to tell you or needs a way to communicate to you that you're getting your attention, that you're thinking a lot. So I was hosting a workshop in, I forgot, in I think it was Bali, Indonesia. And I said something to the effect of, there was a time when the first human ever had a really bad hangover and they didn't understand what a hangover was. They probably thought they were going to die. Like, oh, I've been poisoned. This is terrible, and like, because it was the first time that person ever had a hangover. And then, but now when we have hangovers, we're not too fussed about it. We're like, oh, vitamin C, Tylenol, I'm going to rest, and it reminds me of what you were saying. It's like, oh, you're even the feelings that don't feel safe, it's your body and your mind's way of keeping you safe because it's telling you what's happening in your head. And when we see that, okay, it's doing its job. The system is working. The fear, the anxiety, the system is working because it's doing what it's meant to do, which is to give you a real reaction to what's going on in your head.
Exactly. And also, my mentor, one of them is Dr. Bill Pettit, who's this amazing retired psychiatrist, and he will call them love letters, and when you understand it, and also just like it would be counterproductive to beat ourselves up if we had a hangover. It's like, sure, we might learn from that, but it's also like, yeah, a lot of humans get hangovers. And
Yeah.
so, you know, one big thing that mine was this feeling of dissociation or derealization, this out of body, weird, trippy, and I didn't know that's what I was experiencing until actually I stopped experiencing it. But then there were some times that when my mind would get really going and that feeling would come back. And I, just what you're saying, it was like a hangover, like a
Yeah.
fever. I'd be like, oh, or just like a blister, or I'm sitting in one position for too long. And I love that you brought that up because that is when, like, that was my least favorite symptom. And I would be like, and then when there was, even in the past few years, there's been some times that's been an experience, like very mild. And the overwhelming feeling is this is so safe, just as, and so safe, so temporary, and it just changes on its own. That just as, yeah, there might be some things we do, like, as you said, we can very gently take care of ourselves with a hangover, but also like melting in. And that's what I think it's like. I feel for me, my language is like I just soften into how safe it is.
Yeah.
Um, um, and I remember an early Sid Banks quote that just was like resonated so much. If the only thing people learned was not to fear their experience, that alone would change the world.
Yeah.
And and that's like, I just want to scream from the rooftops too,
Mm.
um how safe our feelings are,
Yeah.
and how they're changing. It's like we have thoughts and then we have new feelings. And um oh, can I share one interesting
Yeah.
thing? Hangover. I'm not a big drinker, but I was like 2 years ago or something, I went with my girlfriend and we just drank so much wine. And I was so hungover the next day. And I had to see clients. And I really place a lot of value on seeing clients and being in a good feeling. And I was hungover. And I remember it occurred to me, what does a hangover feel like with no thought? And I was genuinely just curious. And I just like laid down and my thought fell away. And there was just a bright white light. And there was no hangover with no thoughts. And and it wasn't that then I didn't have a hangover for the rest of the day. It's like I don't even know how to have the words because I've been having all of these insights about pain and all this stuff and seeing the role of thought there. And it just occurred to me. And it was like this portal that honestly 90% of the hangover just fell away. Um,
Yeah.
and without thought, there was no hangover. And I'd had some times that it would just genuinely like, I had COVID a few months after that. What does COVID feel like without thought? And it would fall away. And it was this same place of pure peace and white light. And it sounds so cheesy. But it would let me know that like a different a different way to relate to this experience was possible. Not that I had to be in total bliss or let my thinking fall away, but like it was just so cool. It was so fun. And I never would have had that little whatever it was without a hangover to prompt me to just be curious of what's the role of thought in a hangover.
That's so cool. And I'm so happy you shared that story because I'm sure many people can relate. Like I have, because I was on doing a work tour through the Philippines and Indonesia last week, and I was so sick. Like I was sick because each country had a different climate, and my body was like, "What the fuck?" Right? So Philippines was like beach climate, Indonesia was like rainy, Thailand was cold, and very similar to I did think I had a very direct conversation with my body. I was like, "All right, look, I need you to be healthy for the next 3 hours while we do this workshop. After the workshop's done, we can be sick." And very similar to you, like for those 3 hours, I was 90% better. My voice came back, the fever went away, my head cleared, the congestion cleared, the cough went away for 3 hours. And right on the dot, like I think it's all the thought return, and then I was sick, right? But I would because I would had a workshop every like other day, and I would like this shit works. So I kept doing it, right? And I would like get sick and I would get better for like the workshop that I get sick of in. And then I've never experienced anything like that. Like I didn't know I could not have thinking about being sick, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that you brought that up because I think I don't have much thinking about being anxious. And I think I used to sometimes in my content, because I like making content, freedom from anxiety. And what I realized this past year is for me, that means that anxiety is free to show up. It's not a big deal. And sometimes it just shows up and I have no idea what thought it's connected to. Like it just might be a weird wave of anxiety. I don't need to know. I do not go searching for the why, even because our brains are like, why? It's so common. Why am I having too much caffeine? And like I know that that just leads you down the rabbit hole. I don't need to know why. I need to know how safe it is, how temporary. But sometimes if I have an experience of anxiety, it's very clear that I was like maybe stressing myself out with a thought. And these aren't what I recommend to people or what I recommend to techniques because it just occurred to me. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't need to know why. I just felt a wave of anxiety at the gym and it's fine. Or it's super clear, like, oh, I'm stressing about this. And what I did the last time that happened is I just fell out of my thinking into my heart. And I knew again, like how safe it was. I realized I was worrying about a friendship relationship thing and I didn't need to. And without thinking more about it or resisting it, like an idea occurred to me and it was such a safe experience. But so I think I like I didn't know that I could. I guess it's for me, it's like sometimes I experience anxiety with just like flowing thinking without like, without resistance, without sometimes it's totally without thought.
I think what you're speaking to is incredibly important because I think a pervasive myth in the personal development world is freedom from anxiety, as if to stop anxiety or not even feel anxiety. And so, what I'm hearing from you is that's not the case. It's not about stopping anxiety or not having any anxiety for the rest of your life, but it's about not being afraid of anxiety, where anxiety is free to come and go, and you can still have a great time or you can still be present. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just one way that I think I'm aware um of my thinking. It's just also an experience like being bored or jealous or sad or irritated. Like, and actually it's more like irritation to me. Like I'm kind of grateful when I realize I'm irritated because that lets me know I'm kind of tense and serious. And I'm not saying people need to go from fear of anxiety to gratitude or anything to it. Like this has been an evolution, but I used to think, tell me what program and what cleanse and what
Yeah.
do I do? I'm never anxious ever again. And now it's like, well, like it's just literally not that big of a deal. And sometimes it's like there is no gratitude. It's just an experience.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. I'm just thinking, I think it was January 1st where I felt just a bit of anxiety at the gym and I didn't seem like there was a little lesson in it, but sometimes I'm like, oh, there I go, getting tense and taking life seriously. And I'm grateful to remember um how safe it is. And I guess that's what's like really like I'm seeing more and more through this illusion because the last time I was anxious a week ago, it was just a few moments now was I saw that I was scared that I had decided to go to dinner with a girlfriend and I was afraid that my boyfriend was going to be mad. I know it sounds so silly, but like I just saw with this compassion but I was also afraid if I didn't go to girlfriend like to dinner, what if she was mad and our friendship ended? And I just saw with more clarity like how safe it all was. But without analyzing it, that became clear because I do want people to know like you don't need to know the why, but sometimes it occurs and that's what occurred to me. I guess I'm seeing more and more some of the like fears that I'll still have because I'm still this beautiful lovable mess that of people being mad at me or making a wrong decision, and I'm seeing much more and more how that is an illusion, that it's like just this feeling of safety. I think that's like this resonating um And so it's like, wait, why be anxious? Because this is safe. And I forgot how safe it is to decide to go to dinner with a girlfriend or
Mm,
not go to dinner. Like, and I know that might seem trivial, but I wouldn't have been aware
mm,
um, of that. And like when I remember that, and just to kind of finish that story, I wasn't gripped by the fear. I fell out of it. And it occurred to me just to tell my boyfriend I'd been on my mind. And I thought I had time in my schedule from 2 to 3. And let's go on a walk and can we connect at this time before I go to dinner? And like it came from love. It
mm,
sounds so cheesy as I'm saying it, but I think like I've more and more when I recognize it, it's like I fall into love and I'm in a better feeling. And if there's something to do, I'm just guided. Um, like my fear in so many ways. I think now this year it's been more relationships and business. It's dissolving this um the fear around that, around
mm.
I don't know. I don't know if that was a ramble.
No, I understand. Um, we're coming up at the end of our podcast. So before we go, I want to ask you, if you could give a gift to everybody who's listening, and it's either a quote, a saying, a Lily Saisism, what would you want to give people?
There's so many things that are coming to me. It's hard to pick just one. I'd love people to know how whole they are, um, how beautifully they're designed. And anytime you don't feel good, don't listen to your thinking. Don't listen to the thinking that says how weird you are, how shitty or how broken.
Yeah,
Um, that like we are no different, we're all designed so beautifully.
yeah,
And um, I don't know. I think it's safe to make mistakes, and I don't think this is coming out perfectly, but maybe that can be the lesson that like you can be just like perfectly imperfect. And I hope maybe people are just feeling the energy that I'm sharing from
yeah,
of love and
yeah,
uh, and uh, and and like just like how oh my gosh how okay we are and everything, that it's right there. Also, like, maybe that's it. It's like everybody listening has everything they're looking for.
mm,
And that's the most like freeing thing. And that's why I get so excited. And sometimes I feel like I can't take credit for the people that are like, you changed my life, because I'm like, no, it's you. Because like you and we get to work with human beings, and human beings are perfect and built for transformation and have everything they need. Everybody has innate health, no exceptions.
yeah,
And so no exceptions at all. And that's the most like exciting thing. It's like I think that's why we can be transformative coaches, because we get to work with human beings, and
yeah.
every human being, no exceptions. It's possible in living in more peace, more free-flowing thinking, more place of health. Um, and that's just like the most hopeful thing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Where can we hang out with you? Where do you hang out?
Yeah. Okay. Well, one way is on Instagram,
Yeah.
and it's underscore peace from within.
All right.
Unfortunately, they're weird underscore, but I
Mm.
love Instagram. It's a great place to connect with me there.
I'll put all your links in the description, and everything anybody needs to know to meet up with you. Also, you have a beautiful community where people can hang out with you on a month-to-month basis. And from what I hear, it's one of the best places to be. If learning how to be less afraid of anxiety is something that's important to you, I highly recommend Lily's community. And thank you so much, Lily. This conversation has been one of my favorites. I've so enjoyed connecting with you, listening to your stories. I know that everybody listening to this, they will get so much value from it, and being able to come back to this conversation and again when they need a reminder that they don't need to be so afraid of anxiety.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Lily. Bye bye.
Bye.